Welcome back to another episode of Spiritual Teachers Podcast. With me today is my friend Tyler. Tyler is a seeker of truth. Tyler is passionate about individual and collective liberation and believes in spiritual sovereignty for the people. So, welcome on, Tyler. It's such an honor to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm super stoked. We got some really powerful topics to discuss today. One of them is IFA as a cosmology, sorcery, the real mystery of West African voodoo, and the difference between hoodoo and voodoo. So I'm going to learn a lot from this podcast. I already know because I know very little, and what little I know is from you sharing with me. So I'm really excited to learn and to understand a little bit more about how these practices all started and what they entail. So I know that you wanted to do a little invocation. So
Yeah,
would you like to
yeah,
bless us with
sure.
that?
Oh, hmm. May all guides, benevolent beings, ancestors, spirits, angels of all kinds, may you join us here today in this space. May everything that comes through be in wellness and goodness for our healing and benefit. May anything that wishes to move through, may it find healing and catharsis and transformation through this transmission, through this conversation. We we want nothing but the best for all energies present here today, and we ask that all spirits, all ancestors, all divine beings that come here come with pure intentions of healing and love and light. May may we be well. May we all be well and find freedom in each and every moment. Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, what an awesome way to start the podcast
Yeah.
off. And
Yeah.
I'd love to invite you to share a little bit how your awakening journey started and how how your journey led you to find Ifa and voodoo and these different types of practices.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, I've had the good fortune of spending most of my adult life being able to learn about spiritual practices from all over the world. When I was 20, I experienced psilocybin for the first time, and that was a big transformation and turning point. I remember just crying from the beauty of how how perfect life could feel and life could be.
Hmm.
And and that kicked off a journey into the exploration of consciousness and starting from basically being an atheist um, to where I am today, which is far more complicated than I can put into any word. But it's about freedom from suffering within myself and how to live well in this world because we live in a world where it's complicated to be a human. It's complicated to be a human today. It's complicated to be a human who is seeking seeking freedom when there's so much distortion and so much dissonance. So navigating through all of that, and I feel like that's where a lot of my the way that I kind of combine my different practices really serves me. Um, uh, yeah, and navigating that also as a we're all responsible for all the human things that life today takes, right? So,
Hmm.
um, Yeah, and so basically it started when I was 20 with psilocybin, and that led to kind of my exploration of, at the time I'd say psychedelics. I don't actually really use that term anymore. I prefer entheogen, I think
Hmm.
connecting, um, understanding the connection to source, to God, to spirit is really important in how we relate to these, or plant medicines, or if I'm with those, sometimes it's mother if I'm with ayahuasca, or father with some of the other medicines. Um, I think of the mushrooms as the children, the divine children. So yeah, finding our relationship with, finding our own language and how we relate is so important. It's so important that we're not taking on a dogma or a system of belief just because. It's finding that resonance in the heart of what makes us feel good, what makes our nervous system really receive, the medicine and the blessings of these practices.
Hmm.
So so it started with psilocybin and uh, LSD, DMT, a couple of different psychedelics. And then in 2012, I majored in psychology. I went to UC Santa Cruz and dis discovered there was a study abroad program that was provided through the UC system. And
Mm.
I looked on a list and I thought, what would be the most interesting, different experience I could have? And I saw Turkey, I saw Vietnam, and I saw Ghana. And just like that, I said, yeah, Ghana makes sense. So
Hmm.
within that 30-second, 2-minute decision, literally 2 minutes, that kind of changed the course of my trajectory in life. And I went and I signed up, and then the next in July of 2012, I was on my way to West Africa for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And that has then led to a since then, so the last 13 years, I've been back to West Africa 6 or 7 times. I'm planning another trip. I have daily communication with, still many friends there, and practitioners. So I'm in regular communication with probably at least five different babalaos or priests in West Africa.
Hmm.
And then I'm connected with many more as well. And so it's a daily practice of relating to this cosmology, which I'm happy to get more into.
Beautiful, beautiful. What a profound journey to end up over
Mm,
there and to
yeah.
learn. I don't know many people that have even visited Africa, let alone
Yeah.
lived there
Yeah.
for an extended period of time. So how long were you out there for?
It was 6 months until January 2013, or very end of December 2012. I was actually in Benin and in Togo, like, which are pretty much the birthplaces of voodoo, when the Mayan calendar shifted
Okay, I was going to ask
in
about that.
December. And that was my first time ever being in a voodoo ceremony. And then I've been back most of my trips. The shortest is 2 weeks. I've done a couple of 3 week, 1 month, and then I think I did another 3 month stay. So I've spent altogether well over a year, kind of in West Africa.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned a voodoo ceremony. So I'm so curious what that looks like and what does that entail? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in this particular one, it was a celebration. I don't know if it was a new Year celebration, or kind of what what the work was, and in this case, it was a lot of drumming, dancing, singing. I was honestly kind of overwhelmed and trying to understand what was happening, and then I was invited, I guess, a group of the priests or like the inner circle practitioner. I was with this other guy I met who was German, and they came over and tagged us and said, "Hey, come into the back, come into this room." And we're in this I don't even know how to describe it, this like kind of dark concrete room. I think there might have been a fire, like a small fire around, and we were sitting in a circle and they were all taking so there's a lot of different ways that in voodoo people um, take medicines, right? And herbs are never separate, right? But I think they passed around some gin, some like gin or local drink that had a certain kind of spiritual powder in it.
Mm.
Not psychedelic, but essentially it's an offering that is made specifically to connect with the spirit. And at the time, in my naiveness, I felt safe and I took the medicine.
Okay.
And my African friend was a little horrified, but there's a lot of what I know now and what I've done. I'd have very different advice from my 20-year-old self. So
So yeah,
yeah,
what happened after you took it?
nothing. I felt empowered, and they said, "Yeah, the spirit is with you." And then I got back to California, and I think I was there. Uh, I think it was the second night I was back in the middle of the night. A glass table in my room spontaneously exploded in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And that was my first experience with African magic. Yeah, it just
Oh,
exploded. And I tried to look up, right, because coming from more like a science logic, like doubting this, like, yeah, there's ways that this does happen sometimes. I guess glass can spontaneously explode. And over the years, the trying to define with synchronicity and kind of like science minded, that has gone out the window because other experiences I have just I don't prescribe to that point of view anymore.
mhm.
That being said, it's the magic is not there's nothing outside of the realm of physics. So a lot of voodoo, it's not magic because it's outside of the realm of reality. It's actually their understanding of how to tap into spiritual reality and physics, and they're operating within paradigms and understandings that we just usually don't have in the West. Uh,
Okay. Okay. So now looking back at it, what was going on with that table? How do you perceive it now from this perspective?
I think the contrast of the energy was so strong that it literally just the physics that couldn't, the the difference of the physics of the energy I was coming back with, and then the space I was in, being back in
Mm,
California, in that contrast, it couldn't handle that dissonance.
like the frequency that you were carrying
Exactly, exactly.
influenced the table and caused it to explode.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've experienced a lot of things, since then, kind of jumping all, it's a lot to try to just put the last 13, 15 years of a lot of very mystical and strange experiences into short words. But we've had literally just this year, we met at Aniwa, we met at this shamanism conference, and since then we've had things like we have a guitar in the room which has strings have been plucked while we're sitting there and nothing is going on. Like literal like spirits or something in the room is able to interact with physics and voodoo has they have deep relationships with different spirits that have interactions on a physical level. Um, and that's actually one of the reasons why it's really important to nuance between spirits that are of divinity. Um, the way that they work is less through interference. Like there's less like interplay with physical reality. Whereas there's certain spirits that are of a I want to say lower vibration, but any spirit that can interact with physicality, right? Because, like, think about we start as a really high frequency as a divine spirit. And the more that you come down to this plane, by nature, the more that we come into matter, we are getting denser,
Hmm.
right? So the spirits that are able to operate in a material plane have to be dense enough to be able to interact materially.
Mm.
Whereas divine spirits, unless you've created a container that you've given them permission and the space is clean enough, you can invite them in and they can work because the space is clean and ready and of this kind of higher frequency that you've brought to the material plane so that they can come in and retain that. Um, in voodoo, there's a lot of spirits that are able to work on a material plane because of the density that they're operating at.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting, and it made me reflect on one time when my guardian angel came into this plane, into this reality, and it was in my parents' basement in Pennsylvania, and uh, I saw like a little blue ball of energy,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then it kind of scared me
Hmm.
because I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" It was like pitch black. I
Hmm.
was trying to sleep,
Hmm.
trying to fall asleep, and then I received a telepathic message,
Hmm.
and it said, "Go on Facebook," because I had Facebook at the time, and
Hmm.
look up this name. It gave me a very specific name. So I
Hmm.
typed in the name, and when I looked up the name, the image of this person was a book that was open.
Hmm.
Like their profile
Hmm.
picture was a book that was
Hmm.
open, and all it said on it was love. And I was like, that's so interesting. So the next night it came again,
Hmm.
and this time I saw the blue ball just for a glimpse,
Hmm.
and then the guardian angel kind of appeared out
Hmm.
of it, and it was like all this sacred geometry, kind of like the flower of life,
Hmm.
but it was all like moving. There was wings, and it didn't really. It was more like energy. It had the shape of the
Hmm.
wings, but it didn't have like a head per se, like maybe a little bit of
Hmm.
resemblance of a head, but it was definitely like a light being.
Hmm.
And then the colors on it were just like translucent, like rainbow
Hmm.
changing
Hmm.
throughout. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't that was in the beginning of my awakening around that time, around
Hmm.
2012 too,
Hmm.
2013. So so that for me was just a reminder to show me that we're here, and we're with you, with me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're here to guide and protect you. And so uh, I didn't know how to create like safe, clear, clean, energetic containers at that point yet. But it was, you know, looking back at it, there wasn't any negative energy. There was crystals around and things like that. So I think it was one of those kind of uh, more necessary experiences because I was really calling in to
Hmm.
have that experience so that I could so my logical mind could feel that that was real, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it makes me really think, which I do think is related. There's a group called the Secopai in I believe they're in Ecuador, Colombia, and they're thought of as some of the original like Yahi drinkers. And one of the things that I saw asked is what's the difference between Yahe and ayahuasca?
Hmm.
And they were explaining that most ayahuasqueros they're uh, they're working with more earthbound spirits. So when it gets dark, the first part of the night is when you have more like kind of like earth-based animal spirits around, and they work a lot with that. And they talked about the difference between earth-based spirits and the celestials, which don't come until like the early hours in the morning. So in
Oh,
Yahe,
okay.
they said like it's really not until 2 a.m., 3 a.m. where the time is right for the celestial beings to come. Um, and when the space isn't coherent, the celestial beings they don't come because they don't interfere with reality the same way that you can have earthbound spirits can and do.
Okay.
Um, so like what you're describing makes me think of like it's more celestial kind of galactic beings that
Yeah.
came down and you would the time, maybe the time of the night, like where you were energetically, they they felt the ability to be able to visit you and your openness to them.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it had to be
so
that. That was a really key component was that
yeah.
I had to release any fear and just fully
Mhm.
trust that it was
Yeah.
uh, a benevolent, loving being. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, so you mentioned the difference between Yahe and ayahuasca. What, so one of them being ayahuasca works more with these animal spirits, and then Yahe, what do they work with more celestial, or is that what
That's
you're
so
going
I've never worked with this group, but that's what I think it comes from a book called The Yahe Drinker. I can find it the source, but yeah, the Yahe traditions in this case work more with the celestial beings. And they say once you've established your relationship with the celestial beings, then you can work with the earthbound spirits more clearly, right? Because you can it's not that more earthbound spirits aren't capable of healing. It's just what frequency that they're operating on.
Okay.
And then in that story, they go on to say like essentially um, a true a true medicine person in this tradition. Um, there's kind of the final part of the initiation is you have to conquer the Devil King.
Mm,
So once you conquer the Devil King, then you're essentially able to bring him under your domain, right? And a lot of earthbound spirits are more susceptible to, um, like in Buddhism, it's Mara. They're more bound by karma. They're just more karmic. Part of their ability to relate materially is associated with kind of where they are on their kind of karmic journey.
yeah, it makes me think about deities like Ganesha, Hanuman, those kind of deities, and I wonder if um, they're more of what you were describing as well, like
Yeah,
Kali, those kind of. Uh,
yeah. So in Ifa, so there I'm not a Baba, I'm not a priest. I'm on the initiation path, but I'm not a Ifa diviner by at least with my current skill sets. But Ifa is essentially it comes from the Yoruba people of Nigeria. And it is a whole kind of cosmology and spiritual system. And essentially what happened is God sent down different Irun moles. So Irun mole are divine spirits that came from heaven. So they're from heaven. And then when they came down to earth, they became Orishas. So an Orisha is essentially Ori means head, and it's also our spirit. So the fundamental, most important spirit that everyone has in their life, the one we should always kind of literally, you can wake up and wash the crown. You're praying to your Ori. You're praying to your divine spirit. So like we all have a like our guiding spirit is our own spirit of our being.
Like our
So
highest self?
exactly, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So Ori or Orisha is the name of like a deity in Ifa, but an Orisha came to Earth, and like a humans can become Orishas. So like we can become elevated ancestors that we essentially through our journey become our kind of like a deified greater self. And then Orishas, when we pass, we can go back to heaven. And some of the main Shango is a really well-known Orisha, and his story of basically him becoming an Orisha and how he ascended to heaven. So not and there's also like it goes a lot of directions, but essentially in this cosmology, they do differentiate between divine spirits, and then essentially once a spirit is on Earth, once they're here on Earth in form, they're an Orisha. So they might have came from the celestial realm, but once they're here, they're there's a different way that they kind of personify them. So
Okay. Okay. So what is Ifa? Just so that
yeah,
and
so
and how does it relate to voodoo?
okay, so good question and very vast. So Ifa is essentially the spiritual cosmology in this from the Yoruba people of Nigeria. Um, God, usually called Olodumare, and Olodumare translates something like the bringer of the Odu or the keeper of the Odu. I apologize if that translation's a little off, but Odus are frequencies of reality. Odu is also sometimes translated as womb. So there is a deep connection with the understanding that all of this comes from the womb.
Mm,
All of this comes from the source. And and one of the biggest parts of actually Ifa mysteries is specifically about this concept. And there's really specific rules and like initiate let's when we are initiated, part of that is coming from our relationship with the womb, with essentially the womb of the universe. So Ifa has there's 256 different frequencies that make up reality. So it's a binary system. So there's two rows of four, and it's essentially face up or face down. If I can grab chains and show you what it looks like.
mhm.
And there's 16 combinations on the right and 16 combinations on the left. And of these 16 times 16 combinations, you have 256 combinations.
Okay.
The initiation process into IFA, we are all born under one of these 256 Odus. And that Odu, they're vast. It's like a whole universe. Each sign is a universe in itself. And sometimes you see like a truly proficient Babalao should know at least 16 different major stories. So think like their whole like deep, deep like stories. Each sign has I've heard 256. I've heard is it 4078, whatever. It's all in kind of like 16s and fours. And interestingly, 256 is also, I think, the base code for coding languages. So think of this as like this is the universal coding language of spiritual reality.
Of this
And it's
reality,
on
right? Of this simulation that
of
we're in.
of this, yes, exactly. It's made up of these frequencies. And even what's interesting, like my friend is a electrical engineer, and he was explaining how like when we code, essentially it's a system of yes or no's. It's like binary. We're literally charging silica, and based off the binary code, that's what like spits out an output. IFA is kind of the same thing. It's understood this code of reality and codified it. So Oludamare sent, oh,
Yeah, I just had a question. So it sounds like it's kind of like the ones and zeros in code and in on the
mhm,
computer, like in the
yeah,
Matrix, right?
hmm.
And then when you're talking about chains,
Hmm.
those are strings of shells, uh,
Yeah,
primarily, right?
exactly. There, yeah. So it's usually a chain, and it has 18, sorry, it has 8 different halves of palm seeds. So Ifa is the spiritual system of the palm tree.
Okay.
So they're palm nuts. So basically half the palm nut is cut in half, and then if it lands open, it's face up. Or cowrie shells are also used. So like I have a cowrie shell here. So like this is face up
Uh-huh.
for the cowrie, and then this is face down, or
Got it.
this is either 0 or 2, and this is 1.
Okay. Okay.
And
And so is there anything written on them? Like is there any like symbols on them when
you
you're casting?
um no, it's just eight different options of up or down. And so basically you take the chains and they'll throw it, but there's a whole way that it's done. And this comes from Orun Mila, who basically God sent essentially a prophet, or he sent a master teacher called Orun Mila. Orun Mila came to Earth with the different divine spirits. They all kind of came. I've asked when. I've heard some people say like 10,000 years ago this happened. It's kind of confusing. You can also, there's different things like you were talking about Ganesha and different Hanuman. In the Vedas, they talk about when. My friend who so you can, it seems like something happened in the last 6 to 12,000 years ago, where a lot of these gods were living on Earth,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
At least that's how it's taught. So Orunmila came, taught this whole divination system, and what happens is God. The reason God sent Orunmila is so that the people could have a way to solve their problems on Earth. So
Mm.
when we're having a problem in life, you're consulting a Baba, you're consulting a pri or a Ianifa, the female version of a Baba and um and Baba Lao, essentially Baba is kind of like father and Awo is mysteries. So it's kind of like a father of the mysteries. And based on what happens through this Ifa reading and through the messages he receives in different ways that you can ask kind of questions, Ifa is going to prescribe, say, okay, this is what's happening in your spiritual reality. This is the energy that you're facing. This is, does this energy come, is something blocked, or are you needing support? Does it come with essentially good fortune or misfortune? If it comes with misfortune, it's saying, hey, there's a negative energy around that we have to settle to bring into harmony.
Mm.
Or if it comes with good fortune, it's saying, hey, the blessings are coming. Let's do the prayer work to bring in, to really call in the fruit of all of these blessings.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and
That makes sense.
yeah, so Ifa, it's very vast. Every sign has all of the different Orishas, all of the different divine spirits and deities that work in. It has different medicines. It has different, it's called Ebo. And well, I want to take a pause because Ebo is a really important concept to understand with Ifa. From here, I can explain Voodoo versus Ifa
Okay.
as well.
Okay. We're
Yeah,
getting there.
yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So
Um,
what is Edo?
Ebo.
Ebo. Uh-huh.
Ebo is, it usually translates to sacrifice, but the meaning is so much deeper. Like Ebo is the closest thing in Hinduism you have puja, which is essentially offerings to deities or certain offering rituals. Ebo is the closest thing I can think of to puja, but Ebo is essentially when we identify what is happening on a frequency level. And and these IFA readings can be painfully accurate, painfully accurate. I've had IFA readings get specific to you have a specific thing, this energy with your past lover, specific in this frequency of something happened there. You need to go address that because you have an astral cord that is preventing blessings. Or your mother, a certain Orisha has been trying to communicate with your mother. And because that Orisha is neglected, and this Orisha also guides your family, you need to go resolve what your parents didn't so that your ancestors, like it can get very, very layered.
Okay.
Ebo is what we are offering to bring harmony in the spiritual realities. So Ebo, and it can be different things. It's Ebo is essentially ritual. Um, it can be different, like there's different materials that they use. There's plants, there's gin, there's all different spiritual materials. The biggest kind of, I'd say, really difficult thing for the West to integrate is with animals.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to talk about, and it's a difficult one. I can give the light side and I can give kind of where it goes sideways, which is where you see it happen.
Hmm.
Um, Ebo they are the offerings and rituals that harmonize the spiritual frequencies that we're in. So let's say that you are having an issue and it's identified, oh, okay, Ogun, he's kind of the god of metal, the god of war, the god of agriculture. He's also the one who opens the path. Let's say Ogun, either he's not happy with you for some reason, or you need his energy to cut through to open the way to where you're going. So they might say, oh, you need to give an offering to Ogun. That offering, and they'll ask, okay, Ogun, what is the offering you'll take? And maybe he says, all right, I need a rooster and palm oil and schnapps, like gin. If you go, gin is actually some say you can't eat, we'll say palm wine. There's like a local drink that palm wine I think he takes. And you go and you basically will pray, okay, Ogun, here are your offerings. Before you offer them, you actually there's a way, it's called a kola nut. So they use kola nuts to divine and they'll ask, like, do you accept the offering? Do you have any other messages for us before? Okay, offering is accepted. Yes. And then they'll give the offering, and that will open up that dimension
Mm,
of the energetic reality for you.
okay.
Um,
Like
and
remove the
then
blocks.
exactly. So an Odu might say, all right, there's five different rituals. There's five different ebos we need to do. We need to propagate your Ori. You need to get right with your higher self, and your higher self is asking for this. This specific Eshu, who he's a really complicated figure. Papa Legba is the way in Voodoo it's taught, and he's an incredibly important and essential figure who essentially opens he rules the crossroads and he's the divine messenger between heaven and earth. He might need a ritual. And you do these different things, and essentially it clears the way of spiritual reality. So, like, Ebo isn't magic, it doesn't do the work for us. What it does is it removes the spiritual blockages that are happening so that our life can move freely without those energetic blockages in place.
Okay. Okay. And so you started touching on animal sacrifice. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So I will preface with saying I actually I've spent a lot of time with the Pali Canon and Theravada Buddhism and rectifying how I feel about um, animal sacrifice, and especially being from the West, not being exposed to it, it has been one of the most challenging things to integrate. So I'm going to start with explaining why it's done and how it works.
Hmm.
So essentially, essentially, animals. How I've experienced it in Africa and how I've found Africans relate to animals, there is a kind of way that like they never became separate from our life, right? Like if you think of our ancestral relationship with homesteading, if you think about all of the meat that we're eating as a culture, we've kind of taken that and we've removed that from our visibility. And now meat is something we only get in the grocery store.
Hmm.
Well, if you think about village life, if a certain energy is blocking the way, and let's say, okay, there's a goat offering that's being asked for. What they say is that Ashe is essentially spiritual power, and Ashe resides in the blood. In Chinese medicine, um, there's a saying like, "Qi moves blood, blood nourishes qi." So you can think of Ashe kind of like a chi or spiritual potency, even though it's much more complicated. It's more layered than that too. Inside of blood is essentially life force energy. So when a ritual is done, by giving blood, it's kind of opening the portal and it's pouring life force energy into prayer and kind of communicating between, it's essentially sending spiritual energy or like it's giving nourishment to a spiritual movement that's happening. Now, what happens afterwards, which is an important part, that goat is cooked. A little bit is given to the deities. And then the family eats all of the meat. And you actually, by eating the meal that's prepared for the deities, you're essentially communing. You're going, okay, Ogun, hey, here's this rooster I've offered you. Now I'm eating the meat, the same animal that I've offered to you. I'm eating the meat and I'm communing and I'm receiving that nourishment and that energy in relationship with you.
Okay, so yeah, that's an important piece because you know, my understanding from the little bit that I had was that it was like a separate ceremony. That animal was just used for that offering, and then that was it. But when it's used for the family, every piece of it is eaten and used, then it's actually seems like it's more um, that there's a deeper spiritual connection with this animal because you're thanking it, you're offering it to a higher power, and then you're also consuming it after that. So there's this reciprocation, there's this harmony that seems to be. Are there ever offerings that are just for the deities and nobody eats it or they're buried or anything like that?
There, there are, and this is where there's different directions I can go because what I've learned is like the cosmology in these systems is vast. It's vast. So like IFA cannot be mastered by any one person. If you find a 90-year-old Ifa priest, 95-year-old Ifa priest who's been practicing his entire life, he would be the first to tell you, no, I don't know everything about Ifa. Like that's not possible, like so the cosmology is really vast. There are rituals done where the animal is only used. One of the main ways I've seen this done is if it's been identified that death is going to come to a family. There's certain rituals that are done at like graveyards. There's special graveyards where it's usually called changing heads. So in a changing head ritual, what's kind of identified is, oh, death is on a family or death is on a person. We need to do a ritual to essentially move the death from this person to the animal instead.
Mm,
How they handle the meat in those situations is different. You also get into deeper voodoo because like Ifa, Ifa exists Ifa exists for the betterment of humanity. Like Ifa, you can call a religion, but anyone can be initiated into Ifa. Anyone can find their life path destiny. It's not, Ifa doesn't ask you to join a cult. It's like you can make the decision to go through this initiation process to learn about who you are, who your guiding ancestors are, who your guiding deities are, what the specific taboos of the frequency you were born under are, what you as a person should be doing to stay in alignment. That's not the same as like giving power away to an external authority. Now, of
right.
course, Matt, in voodoo, you have all sorts of things. Yes, there's animals, like sometimes they don't really you can have animals that are buried. They'll just bury the whole animal. It's a certain ritual where they'll kill the animal and then it's all buried. Usually, it can be as a protection. It can be, again, to avoid death. In really intense rituals, they'll bury animals alive. Like that is a thing that does happen in voodoo. Usually, that's associated with like immense spiritual power. Like if you're doing something very, very spiritually powerful, or again, you're trying to avoid death. Like some of them will say, like, okay, you have to bury the animal alive to bury the life.
And
Um,
most of the animals that they're using are chickens, cows, goats, those kind of things, or are they also working with gazelles and native animals as well?
no, I've never. Um, Voodoo can have all sorts of things, especially hunters, and like the story of like hunters and sorcery is also important. So you can have voodoo shrines that will use exotic animals. Ifa itself, it's mostly chickens, roosters, like guinea fowl, goat, sheep can be used, cow. Some of them will use duck. They're all like essentially like animals that can be raised.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, some practices do use dogs and cats, like that happens too, and those have different frequencies. Only certain yeah, only certain Orishas you can even like do that for, or certain deities you can do that for. And it's usually about human protection and like waving off deep spiritual attacks. Because like dogs and cats are closest to us. So
Hmm.
when dogs and cats are used, it's kind of like, okay, this is a way to keep the attacks away from the family.
Hmm.
And this,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So, it seems like there's many layers and different tribes probably work in slightly different ways, right?
yep. Yeah, yeah, different cultures. And so like Ifa, Ifa comes from the Yoruba. A lot of voodoo is associated with the Awe people in Ghana, Togo, Benin. There's Cote d'Ivoire that the Awe are around. And you also have the Fon people in Benin are really associated with voodoo, and they're kind of like I've heard different, they're mixed with AOAs or they're not, like that there's all different things. And I've heard some of the AOAs say that they're actually their ancestry comes from the Nubians, like they actually came from the migration pattern of the Nubians of Egypt. Our godfather who initiated us said Aways can read the hieroglyphs, like essentially in their language. They never lost the codex. Like when they look at the hieroglyphs, it's an exact mirror of their spoken language.
Oh, wow.
And the Aways are immensely powerful as a people. They're a very spiritually powerful people. Um, and yeah,
I think that that's a really important thing to add, right? Where a lot of these tribes, or at least some of them, haven't had that um, influence, right? They've continued that straight lineage from thousands of years ago up till today. And like you said, they can still read the hieroglyphs and the petroglyphs, and there's very few cultures around the world that can say that they still continue in that knowledge and wisdom being passed down through generations, right?
exactly. And that's spot on, because that's a lot of like there's different things I've been, exposed to or told. There's a certain there's a lot of spiritual technologies that they have, right? And I've been to places in Benin, especially, which is a very surreal place. And it's thought of as the birthplace of voodoo, which is probably mostly true, but it's still a little bit complicated. You're going to a room where you have a whatever 70, 80-year-old man who his entire life is just being a practitioner for the spirits, sitting in the same room that his great 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 grandfathers tended to,
Mm,
and tending to shrines that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years,
mhm,
hundreds and hundreds of years of tending to the same physical shrines. And yeah, it was actually certain things of the language and culture when I've learned some Ewe built into the language. There is this reciprocity and just understanding of being a spiritual human in the body, being a person who lives in a village. There's this call and response, and like there's this deep energy. There's this deep energy even in how they speak. And they never lost the wisdom and technology of their ancestors.
mhm.
And you're talking to people, it's like, okay, where are you from? Oh, I'm from here. Okay, well, how long have you been here? It's like what, like thousands of years. We never left. There was
Right.
like this is and then you have thousands of years of cultivation of wisdom and intelligence and relationship with the natural world.
Mhm.
And the layers are just so deep. Um like it when this has happened several times, but when we were initiated in Togo in 2021, our priest said, "We'll know if the initiation is successful because it will immediately start raining when we finish, regardless of the season."
Mm,
Sure enough, we finished. It started raining specifically over where we were. Like we could look around and see in the distance other places that it was not raining. Like
mm.
it literally was raining on us. And like it's like, okay, yeah, the deities have accepted the initiation. You know it because you're being rained on when nothing else is being
Wow.
rained on.
So,
And
so
it's that.
what? Yeah, can you share a little bit about what that was you were initiated into, and what that
So in
looked like?
this, yeah, so in this case, this was my initiation into IFA or AFA. AFA is what they call it. So my godfather, he's Ewe. So what happened is Ewe's adopted um Ewe and Yoruba, I think they're cousins ancestrally. They sometimes like I don't exactly know ancestral connection, But the Yoruba and Ewe are different people. The Ewe and the Phone people, once they discovered Ifa, because they're essentially neighbors, they immediately accepted Ifa is this whole cosmology of truth, and
Hmm.
they adapted certain parts. So they have different deities and they have different relationships with the deities, but they took on the umbrella of Ifa. So I was initiated into Ifa or Afa in Togo, and that was a process of essentially discovering my specific life path frequency I came in under, understanding like the deities that walk with me, receiving different. I was also initiated into Mami Don, which is it's usually associated with the priestesses. So it's essentially there's a whole section of kind of really priestess dominated work of a lot of like the water spirits and the healing, lighter
Mm.
healing spirits.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, we slept in the shrine room for almost a week, and I was having the craziest visuals of my life without medicine. I was basically getting like downloads from the spirits, more
Wow.
intense than any ayahuasca visuals I've ever had,
Yeah.
but without plant medicine.
Yeah. Do you want to share?
And
Do you want to share any of those?
the visions,
Yeah, only if you
they're
feel called.
sure. So where do I want to take it? I So there's different like one of the things like I just want to take a step back. So voodoo, as I've been taught, the literal translation, vu means like freedom, and do means society or community. So the
Mm,
literal translation of voodoo means freedom for society or freedom for the community. Sometimes it's also translated as wealth.
okay.
Um, You'll hear voodoo also translated as spirit, which is not a accurate, but voodoos are spirits, so it's a little um through time that I had in Ghana, especially Ghana and Togo, and with voodoo priests who they work less with Ifa. And when you have voodoo priests that don't follow Ifa or Afa, it can become much more of the Wild West of practice.
Okay, so
Um,
when you say working with Ifa or Afa, that means they're not casting the shells or the nuts and
that's
using.
correct. They'll have different divinations. So they'll have there's a mirror divination, which is really cool, actually. Still want to learn more about that, where you can kind of see spirits in the mirror, different things. They have different ways of asking questions. And it's not to say that what they're doing is unethical, but they're much more likely to be um, their ethos is not guided by Ifa. And built into Ifa is kind of the guide of how to walk with these spiritual realities. When you
Okay, so
have voodoo, yeah,
they're by nature kind of leaning towards the denser, darker side of things.
yes, usually, not all, and it depends because there's lots of different traditions. But specifically with voodoo, if they're not following Ifa or Afa, they are more likely to be working with um, so they're called zokas or joka. And joka, like jo is fire, and ka means rope. So fire rope or fire cord.
Sounds like
That
Joker.
I know, isn't it? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Those are spiritual technologies that that are immensely powerful. And when I say immensely powerful, I have met and there's even Facebook videos of this, but there's a whole group in the Volta region of Ghana. Um, they do warrior dances where they will use knives all over their body and the knives don't cut them.
Hmm.
Um, there's some that do those with bullets. There are priests I know in Africa that if you brought whatever gun you want, they go, yeah, go ahead, try to shoot me. I'll show you that the spirit I have doesn't allow that. Not
Mm.
not as an exaggeration, not as lip service. Like they are that confident in the protection that they have from their spirits that bullets and weapons don't have the ability to penetrate physical reality to cause them harm.
And
Um,
I'm so curious about that. So is it, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but is it like they're calling on their spirits to come into this dimension to knock the bullet down? Are they building such a strong aura and an energetic field around themselves that it can't penetrate? What do you know like what is actually, I mean, there's probably different ways, but what are, do you know, have they ever shared with you what is actually going on in a situation like a gun
so
coming in?
yeah, there are different ways I know of. There's some that are more passive. So there's charms where um if you just have the physical object on you, it either the gun will miss, like it won't fire, or like somehow the dance that the most powerful warriors will do, they'll have this kind of armor on and you'll see them shake off the bullets. So somehow, and it's not like bulletproof vests, it's like leather. It's just like leather, but somehow the leather is imbued with magic. The when I was that was one of like that's an initiation I've received because earlier in my journey I really wanted to prove that the spirits were real. And one of the priests said, like, okay, like y the only way to prove it is you have to pass through it yourself.
Mm.
So how that works is something. Ooh, uh, sorry about that. There's a certain ritual that's done, and you receive the spirit, and then the spirit has different frequency. Like you learn the frequency of the spirit, and you're given the spirit's name, so which is a spirit word,
So
right? So
literally,
like you're
will it come into your body? Is that part of it?
yes. So usually there's a there one of if anyone's interested, I think it's called Revolution. They're a group in Ghana. There's different people you can like learn more about it, and they have videos where you'll see like one of the ways they tested that the spirit's working is like essentially you have to go into a trance and shake. But essentially the spirit you build a relationship with the spirit and then you can call on it and invoke it. And when you say the spirit word, you feel this kind of like surge of energy. And you can know, like the same way if you call in, if you invoke your angels, you can feel when they're present, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You can feel there's one is saying the name, the other is like, oh, I feel them. They've arrived in the room with me.
Hmm.
Um, Same with this. So you're given an invocation, and then when you speak it, like they always say, like this, the tongue holds power, the spoken word holds power. So they understand vibration and invocation and relation. And with the when I saw the warrior dance, I think I've seen it a couple of times, but the main time I saw it like face to face, someone did it for me directly in front of me. He took a little bit of gin, he poured libation, so he poured the gin to the ground. He started saying the spirit name, and he kind of went into this sort of semi-trance. And then we are in a circle of guys, like maybe eight of us, not that big. Um, and there was a call and response. So we would sing like Palabewonga, Asulamalu, Palabewonga, Sulamalu, and we built this kind of like container of frequency. So he personally connected with his own spirit guide. We were singing essentially the song of the knife protection, like a warrior song.
Hmm.
And then it kind of built the energy. And then he went full they were sharpening the knives like they were real knives, and he was cutting over his arms, his chest, his eye, his tongue, his neck. Like he was all sorts of crazy things. And at a certain point, he was like, "You think this is fate? Like you try it on me then. Like if you think I'm just doing a show, like take the knife. You try to cut me with the knife."
There
And
was
then
not a
he,
single drop of blood, right, while he's doing all
not a
that.
single drop, not a single drop, not a single drop. And then he said, he looked at me, and I was my jaw was just drop. Like it was the most astonishing thing. No plant medicines, no anything. We, um, and he grabbed my arm. He grabbed my arm, and he said, "No fear, no fear." And he took the knife and he started cutting on my arm with it. And essentially, the spirit had transferred because the spirit was in the space and he was making physical contact. It then was protecting me. And it was the craziest thing because I could feel how sharp the metal was, and it was giving me almost like rug burn or razor burn. Like it was rubbing aggressively, but it couldn't actually cut through the skin. So it was like moving the skin, and it was like almost getting like a, like a burn, like a rope burn almost.
Hmm.
Um, but it couldn't actually cut through. So you'll see the lines where it's trying to cut through the skin, but it's not able to make any incision.
That's so
Um,
interesting.
and there's videos, that is the one of all of the things I'm aware of in voodoo where people like demonstrate and show, that is the most probably public. It's called Akbi. Like it's a known warrior dance that they will do it all day. Like I've seen Facebook videos of guys just craziness. So
So, so that brings back the question. Okay, I guess you already answered it, but just so
yeah,
that I can summarize it, the difference between Ifa and Voodoo is that in Voodoo, they're not using the Ifa way of casting the chains, right, with the shells or the nuts on them, either landing on the heads or the tails side of the shell or the nut, right? And then those represent the different, what did you say, 256?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
256 frequencies of this reality that each one of us is born into, right?
Yeah, we're each born into one of those signs, like our life path destiny.
And each one has a separate deity. So when that guy was calling in his spirit guide, that
Yeah.
was his deity.
Yeah, and then it gets complicated with voodoo or voodoo or voodoo. There's a lot of ways. These spirits are not sense are a lot of them are outside of the Ifa cosmology. So think of it like if I'm a spirit and you're a spirit. Think of it in voodoo, you're like, oh, I want this specific spirit. And let's say like somehow it's not so much like, let's say a specific kind of spirit exists. Anyone can have a relationship with that spirit. They're not necessarily divine spirits. Sometimes they're technologies, right? Like, is your phone a spirit? It's like you can put things together and then program it, and now suddenly it works for and has efficacy, and you can make it again. So like there starts to get this really um s- complicated relationship. Like in voodoo and zokas, you can essentially create technologies and program them. I've heard that originally zokas were the weapons of the deities. So the hunters, when they would go into the forest, would encounter these like big animals, and they needed something to protect themselves, and they stole the weapons from the gods so they could have their own weapon to protect against the animals. Like I've heard, um, so voodoo, and you have like voodoo with Afa, you can have voodoo practitioners who follow Ifa, and usually there's main spirits. Like um, there's certain voodoos that a lot of different priests will work with. But then there's also like hundreds, thousands of like lesser spirits or different technologies that certain people will just like imagine like a voodoo priest might have 200 different spirits, like 200 different technologies, and he knows kind of the formula for each one. He's able to activate them. He's able to give that formula to someone else and activate them with the formula and give them the word. And now, okay, now I have this incantation that I can go use. Those are Zokas. So
Okay.
it gets,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. The Ifa priests and shamans, they basically can either work with spirits or deities, but not all spirits are deities, right?
That's right. And then
Okay.
there's even like categories of like Orishas, like divinities on earth, deities on earth. And then there's some that are like directly from heaven. Um, and then spirits aren't even necessarily deity, they might be called deities. We're also combining like so many different, trying to do this
Yeah.
across cultures and language,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Uh, so when I think of voodoo, I think of a doll with pins on it, right? That's what the majority of society in
uh-huh.
America at least thinks of when they think of voodoo. So that's obviously associated with something dark and negative, because I can't imagine using that in a good way, right?
hmm Yeah,
So yeah,
I've never heard of a voodoo doll in West African voodoo, which is mainly what I'm familiar with and understand. I can share the little bit I know of how it moved into the Americas.
yeah.
But essentially, just to like wrap that up, there are voodoos that are purely for protection. And they're essentially think of a voodoo as it's a technology that is encoded with our intention and prayer and what we put into it. So there's voodoos that they have no function other than to protect us or help us.
Mm.
There's certain voodoos that have no function other than to cause harm, right?
And so are you using voodoo as an interchangeable word for spirit, like spirits?
Currently, I am, or
Okay.
I can say Zoka if I want to get more, because we didn't get into. Uh, there's a lot, yeah, there's a lot of ways to take this, but Zoka in this way, think of them as spiritual technologies that are programmable, and they can kind of remain programmable, or some of them are also like they're not technologies, they're actual like spirits or divinities. Or they're technologies that are related to, like, if I'm calling my iPhone a god, even though it's like, a voodoo in this case is a spirit. A Zoka is a technology that may or may not be a spirit. Um, like what you're describing of the voodoo doll, that I wouldn't call a spirit. I would call it a Zoka. I would call it a technology, and you're basically doing a certain thing to cause harm with it.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay, yeah. So then it brings on that question of the difference between voodoo and hoodoo.
Yeah, so voodoo, basically what happened with what I know of the slave trade, right? Like different European colonizers um, came to different parts of Africa, and you have different slave ports all throughout West Africa. Um, and different places that different slaves were sent to, right? Or different enslaved Africans, So a lot of people from Benin ended up in like Bahia, Brazil, and Haiti. And I think some in Louisiana as well. And then you have different places and like different different slave trades brought different. groups of people to different places, and it also, of course, all mixed. They brought with them their traditional practices, right? So, um, Haitian voodoo comes from the people from the slave trade who came, I think, especially from Benin, and they brought the different deities and cosmologies, and then they adapted it to what was present there. So every time African spirituality landed somewhere, it was adapted to the elements and the culture and what was available of the people. Like voodoo is like these are contemporary practices, so they're always evolving and like interplaying with where they are and what is accessible. Um, Hoodoo, I think, is it has roots from kind of these voodoo spirit, spiritual systems, and then it's been adopted by different people of the Americas, in different African cultures. Like it's not just the Aways or not just the Yoruba. There were many different cultures, and a lot of also the cultures that were enslaved came from northern parts. So a lot of the coastal people were the ones who actually held more power, and then slaves were sometimes conquered tribes from more northern regions, which had their own spiritual system. So like Fulani, I know is one of them, and there's actually a whole pantheon in West Africa called Mama Chamba, and Mama Chamba is the pantheon specifically for Africans who were enslaved.
Okay.
Um, so it in hoodoo, I don't know as much, but essentially it's probably taking those technologies, the practices from West Africa, and then maybe there's also indigenous influence to whatever the native people were there, or just kind of modern ingenuity and whatever they had to do to hide while they were enslaved to keep their practices alive in secret, right? Because it's not like these were allowed to be practiced. So
Right. So hoodoo seems like something that was created more um, in Haiti, Brazil, and America.
I think hoodoo was specifically in the US.
Okay.
I think hoodoo was specifically in the US. I would have to do more. I would want to research more because I know less about it. But I think hoodoo specifically in the US. You have Candomblé, you have Santeria, you have leukemia, you have Haitian voodoo. So different places in South and Central America that different names for the practices.
Okay.
And some work closer with IFA and some don't. Like I don't think Haitian voodoo has IFA presence much in it, but I think like Lukumi and Santeria kept a lot of IFA's presence in it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. It seems like there's so many branches to these practices, right? Even you mentioned some terms that go interchangeably with voodoo, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Voodoo, I think you said, right?
oh, well, there's different. So, yeah, I said voodoo or vodun. It depends on like what language they're saying voodoo from.
Okay.
But then there's also they'll call the voodoos as um you can use the term voodoo for like a powerful deity. So like voodoo dawn is the voodoo of the python or of the snake, which is
Oh, okay.
super super important in Ifa. I think is it Essu Dumare? There's a different name, and it's the double serpent python, and that's the patron saint of the priestesses. And they're kind of like Naga, so there's like mermaids. Yeah, it's voodoo, but basically if you're in Togo, Benin, and then parts of Ghana, you'll hear the word voodoo to talk about spirits or talk about deities.
Okay. Okay. And then it seems like Eastern and Southern Africa also has their own.
Yeah, it's I think so there's so many. I mean, Ghana, I think, is the size of Oregon, and there's 67 different native languages. So like the cultural diversity in Africa is huge, right? So
Mhm.
it's really diverse. But yeah, different parts of Africa have their own traditional spiritual systems, which are not voodoo. They're their own practices. But you do see different commonalities of like each group has a way of working with the indigenous wisdom of nature and relating to it. So, and what
Yeah,
forms of
man.
that.
I mean, that's super super interesting. And I think we haven't really talked about sorcery yet.
Yeah, so sorcery are like zokas are so zokas are essentially what's used for sorcery. And I will I will preface because this is something that is really important to understand, and it is fundamental to IFA and voodoo. So when people say witchcraft, that is not really how like um the way it's taught is that there are they're called the queens of the night, queens of the birds. Literally, Iamiage, um, it translates usually to our mothers. Or Non in voodoo, she's the queen of the night, and Non literally, I think, means mother or like grandmother.
Mm,
Um, so what they say is that if you think about witchcraft, I talked about Ashe earlier being this kind of essential spiritual potency. And I talked about how Odus come from, um, it's translated sometimes as womb, right? Or there's
right.
this understanding that the womb is actually the source of Ashe. The womb is the um essentially the most powerful, you could call it the most powerful deity in Ifa, and it's also the most secret and then kind of the most mystery around it, translates to the womb of existence.
Hmm.
So the Iami, the mothers, are associated with this primordial energy of magic that exists in reality.
Hmm.
Um, and something about having a womb gives a more direct relationship with that magic.
Hmm.
So when life is going well or when life is going poorly, it's the witches who have this over like have pure magic kind of in their DNA, who have the power to make radical transformative change for us in our lives.
Hmm.
The witches are also, you can try to appease them and you can pray to them. If they don't want to accept your offering, they don't. You can't just command them. They are a force that has to be approached with reverence.
Mm,
They're a really, really powerful force, and they guide us through the night. They guide us through t t dark times, tough times. Like if they've taken us as their child, they will protect us, right? And they can help make real, they're associated sometimes with the marketplace and trend any sort of, they can move in all directions. They can move in mysterious ways, right? So
mm,
like when we're not in alignment with them, life is really, really difficult, right? If they're not happy with us, they can make life extraordinarily challenging.
mm,
Um, and that's essentially a magical force, like the mothers, you can appease them, and there's ways to give offerings to them for them to help create kind of transformation in our lives. They're also associated with like childbirth or associated, any big, they're very vast. So you can work with them and they work through kind of the magic, which includes dark magic, because that is their domain. It's dark and light magic. They have an ability to move between worlds and dimensions.
Hmm.
Sorcery are, like I said, like spiritual technologies that can be programmed. So one of the things I was told, they talked about how um, the coiled wire, like the coiled copper, which is used for, think all like all of our electronics or all of telecommunications. Um, I was told that was originally an African technology. So there's a way that they would communicate across distances, or if you had to send a message, there's a certain way that you would like essentially wrap and bundle a message and then use that to communicate through the spirit world. And
Mm.
then when whenever Europeans found it, they somehow they learned the technology and were able to combine it and that, this is from an African priest who was explaining this, but he said, yeah, we had the first telephones. We've had this technology a long time. It just,
Mm.
didn't look like that. And
That's really interesting because it makes me think of uh, the different technologies they use for like when they put copper into the garden, right? Like the copper
hmm hmm
rods. They
hmm
put the copper into organite. They
hmm
do like tensor coils, right? To
hmm
like
hmm
amplify chi and energy and
hmm
different things. Uh, and I know copper is used in a lot of those, wire wrapping and those kind of things. So yeah, that's really fascinating. And just before we continue on, I'm like, how would you define this type of sorcery? Because when I think of sorcery, I think of a wizard standing there with a staff with fire coming out of it, you know? So
So
yeah.
the voodoos are immensely powerful, right? And it's hard for us to understand when we, for the most part in the West, have never been exposed to spiritual forces just like beyond us, right? There are like trying to balance this to not make it scary, right? I've had a voodoo priest narrate to me exactly the dream I had the night before to me. He told me, he said, you did exactly this and outlined exactly the dream that I had, a very vivid
Mm.
dream that I had never spoken. So, like, the powers of, um, like teleportation is real. There are priests who absolutely have the ability to teleport in dire needs. There are priests that like um there's some people who will dance inside of bonfires. The fire doesn't burn them.
Mm.
There's a really common one called Zangbato, which he's kind of like a guardian, and it's this thing that voodoo that dances by itself. People claim that no, it's really a voodoo. Other people say it's okay, there's a person inside of it. Well, I don't know about that, but I can say for certain there are priests I've met where the statue starts speaking auditorily. Like the statue itself,
Like a metal statue.
a stone statue
Oh,
gets the
okay.
spirit comes in and starts speaking
Like you see
auditory.
you see the mouth moving? No, you
No,
just
you
hear
just
it.
hear it.
Okay.
You start hearing it, and it's this like crazy alien language that is even hard to like describe the sounds that come out. And
You've
um
experienced that?
yeah, I've experienced that. There's a voodoo I've seen that there's one that moves by itself along the wall. So it'll crawl along the wall. It's an object. It's not motorized. It's like um there's one of the divination tools that the first priest I met. Yeah, it's a spinning stone disc that hovers in the air and like comes up and down to answer questions. Like there's just ways that the spirits are just alive, and that was one of the first ever spirit words I learned, you know, Vujuo Lagbe, Togbio Lagbe, the spirits are alive, the ancestors are
Mm,
alive, and they are, like, because they've never not been. Like they've always, like, we're in a world full of all different beings that we can't see with our eyes.
yeah.
That doesn't make them not there,
Yeah.
and they're there regardless of whether or not we believe them to be. Not believing in the ancestors doesn't mean that the ancestors don't have influence over reality, because either they do or they don't. Our belief is not, it doesn't matter what we believe,
Hmm.
except for the fact that we, through our beliefs, can create fields of reality, which changes the way they influence, right? Like in,
Right. I was gonna say,
um,
like, if you will or manifest like a protective bubble around yourself, there's
yeah,
certain things that can't penetrate that. So
yep, yeah, exactly.
I'm really curious because in the beginning you mentioned something about like living within the laws of physics, right?
Hmm.
So, like, obviously, a disc flying next to you, sharing wisdoms with you, or uh, an object crawling on the wall without anything on it, that kind of defies the laws of physics. So, how does that pertain?
Well, it defies, I mean, it gets really, there's some really far out there stuff. And one of the things that I've realized is like, Um, the way to really experience magic is in ordained ceremony. It's to create a space, it's to absolve our will, it's not to impose our will, it's to pray and call in healing, however that looks, and like set a prayer and intention and surrender what happens to this greater mystery, right? And in that place, anything can happen.
Hmm.
I just had a ceremony a couple weeks ago where we finished the ceremony, and the second we did, we walked outside and there was a giant rainbow, like
Mm.
somehow it was raining and there was a rainbow. And then um, we were told by a certain ritual we needed to do by a Mongolian shaman, and he said, "Okay, you need to find a cup." And then everywhere we went, we couldn't find this cup. And then right before the last place we were going to check, there was the biggest rainbow I've ever seen in the sky. And I knew without a doubt we were about to find the cup there. And sure enough, we did, right?
Mm.
Like, so what I would say, like, if I've tried to understand how it works, it really does combine. What they would say is like the spirit is creating probably a protection around us, and the spirit makes it so. Like something about maybe it's creating an energetic force field and it can't cut through, or but like I guess one of like the fun I've when I've tried to scratch my brain about this, there has to be some belief that there is consciousness that exists outside of biology. So I think that's a really important concept. Like whether if we don't believe that, I think everything else kind of starts to go out of the window, right? But
When you
like
say
if
biology, you mean like scientific, like from what scientists have proven?
n- um well, so like, you know, I don't know what science has to say about energy bodies, right? But if there's such a thing as an energy body that exists outside of a biological material body, right?
Mhm.
Like when you had this presence come and they sounded like beings. Like to me, I interpret that like, oh, that's a being. That being didn't have a physical body, but
Mm.
yet somehow it's interacting in physical reality.
Right.
How exactly that works dimensionally, I don't know, but like let's just like take that forward. Okay, let's say you can have an energetic being, and let's say that being, through whatever frequency, is able to produce sound waves through whatever abilities it has. Well, now you have a being without a body, without a physical body, and somehow through its energetic body, it's able to do something vibrationally and sound is being produced, right? Or, oh, there's a thing on the wall. Here comes this energy, and somehow it's able to, the energy itself is able to kind of like shake and move things,
Mm,
through its frequency. If we don't really believe spirits exist or have that ability, it kind of goes out the window. But if you start asking, like, okay, it's what if it's possible to have an energy body without a physical body? What would that mean?
mm,
Right? What
mhm,
if it's possible for if consciousness has a, you know, if there's consciousness outside of body, how does it? But it's easier. What I've found too is it's still there's established pathways. So like dream time is a really good way to get messages, right? Because there's the channels open,
right.
right? Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that
Yeah,
that
no,
helps.
that's good. Yeah, I think a good place to wrap the podcast up with is just
Mhm.
like there's so much more to this reality than what
Uh,
we can see with the naked eye and hear with the naked ear and experience with touch, right?
mhm.
With the six senses, right? And it's yeah, it's fascinating to see what is available and the different ways that this has been people have been connecting and working with these spirits for and deities for thousands and thousands of years. It's really interesting because I don't know anyone else besides you that works with these practices. So it's very new and very interesting. The whole podcast was like a
Yeah.
whole uh so many new words and new
Yeah.
uh concepts. So yeah, really, really interesting, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Thank you. And there, and just to say too, there's tens of millions of IFA practitioners and lots, it's whole, it's not, it's difficult. It's not, it hasn't been streamlined for the Western audience yet, like other practices have, especially because it's primarily an oral tradition.
right.
Like that's, but I also just want to say too, like, we're all spiritual beings with the divine essence, right? All of these gifts are things that any one of us can cultivate, right? And we all have our own unique gifts of um, you know, pathways that divine spirits and our ancestors will move through us, right? So as we cultivate our gifts, all of these can come online. And it's good to have initiated teachers to help guide us, especially when things become confusing. It's good to have trusted elders and reference points of like how to walk because it's spirituality is not all love and light, Like
Mhm.
that's kind of a misconception. It really is so many things, but love and light and like reaching that place of energetic freedom and freeing ourselves from these energetic chains, like that is what it's all about. So any way that we can develop gifts that heighten our perception of more than just what we see materially and the way that the universe responds, like once you decide and tell your guides, like, hey, I'm open to communication through my dreams.
Mhm.
I will take that communication seriously. I'm open to communication. Like you can send me message, here are the ways that I will receive your messages.
Mhm.
You've given permission for them to go, oh, okay. it's safe to come. Oh, this is a way that he'll listen, like, or she'll listen to us.
Hmm.
Let me work through this channel, right?
Right.
So, um, and also again, like, I think so much is about our intention, our prayer, what we're feeling, and why. Like I started, I I was exposed to like all I wanted to experience something different to break my bubble of atheism. And
Right.
I got it.
You
And it
got
was
it.
in a
You
very,
definitely got
I
it.
got it. It was in a very challenging way that I would never recommend for someone to walk the way I did, right? Because it doesn't excuse my arrogance and my ignorance, right? Like the spirituality also requires humility, and we're kind of trained in the West to not relate with humility. And that's a really dangerous place when we're relating to forces that are, you know, beyond us. So, like, yeah. Anyways, I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story, and I wholeheartedly anything that anyone can do to reconnect with indigenous wisdom and live in a way that's more harmonious in their lives and with each other and uh, yeah, finding purpose to me, like apathy, like not believing in our spiritual purpose. Um, and as my one of my babas says in Nigeria, he said the biggest thing he sees, the biggest mistake that he sees in the world and in the West, we're lazy with our spiritual purpose. We don't take our spiritual purpose seriously, right? We are spiritual beings. We have a soul's purpose. We have the ability to change and manifest our reality. We're not just downstream of this torrent of this flood, right? And it's really painful to move through this kind of awakening process. It's not easy, but but the reward is like you get to claim the fullness of who you are as a human, which is so much more than what we're programmed to believe.
Yeah,
So much more vast than what we're led to believe. So
for sure.
I
Well, thank you
support
so
everyone.
much. Thank you so much, brother. And
Yeah.
you're always welcome back on the podcast. I think we could
Thanks, man.
do another episode down the line for sure. And
Sure.
there's so much more we could talk about.
Uh,
And that was fascinating. I learned so much today. So
yeah.
until next
Thanks for
time,
having
brother,
me.
sending you lots of
Until
love.
next time. Thanks.
Thank
You
you.
too. Take care.
Take
See you,
care.
brother.